In this video, I take a deeper dive into the iRacing setting SSR, Space Screen Reflections, a rain-specific setting and well-known killer of FPS for most VR users. SSR is supposed to show better details of track water, but is the juice worth the squeeze? I take a look from an older gamer's perspective. In the comments section of my previous videos, a number of sim racers, specifically those using VR, have asked me to take a deeper dive into SSR, Space Screen Reflections, if you didn't know, which is this little innocuous looking drop-down menu in the graphical settings. It's supposed to give a more detailed rendering of water on track, puddles and such like. However, this setting can do all sorts of naughty things to your FPS, and for VR sim racers, this is a big no-no. Drop frames can lead to a disrupted lap time, or worse still, a nasty case of VR nausea, which, trust me, is something every VR user wants to avoid. So, given all of that, why even bother using SSR at all? Well, as I said, it's supposed to give a better idea about where you should steer your car during heavy rain to avoid loss of control associated with deep areas of water on the track. And if this is true, having that setting off or even set to low could result in you suffering a significant disadvantage to those drivers in your split who have SSR set to high. But how much difference does SSR really make? And is there any way to improve performance in VR when using SSR?
All good questions.
Baseline for testing. This is the baseline that I have set my system to for this video in order to maximize the FPS during heavy rain when using SSR. These are not the settings I would normally use. I just want to give my system the maximum chance it has to reach the target FPS that I would like. So my headset is temporarily dialed in at 72 Hz, so I'll be looking to attain 72 FPS, although I still have the slider at 1.3x. In addition to this, I have the iRacing settings like so, and I'm using the OpenXR option, and inside the OpenXR toolkit, I have it at a fairly aggressive performance favorable setup. As an aside, if you want to know how to use the OpenXR toolkit with iRacing, take a look at this video, which I will link below. So, with all that done, here is a video of me driving in a sedate fashion, yes, I am being deliberately sedate, around Knockhill in Scotland, one of my favourite tracks. No other cars are present for these early tests. Here you can see it's obviously dry with no rain. All other conditions, time of day and so on, have been set manually. As you can no doubt clearly observe, 72 FPS is easily obtainable with a very generous GPU headroom. And you might ask, older gamer, why on earth do you need such a generous GPU headroom? Trust me, when we turn on SSR, you will see why. As a final note, my CPU is a 13600K with 64 gig of DDR4 RAM, and the GPU is a 4070 Super. I have a video about building the system and one for optimizing the 4070 Super for iRacing. I will link both below. To enhance performance further, I have also turned off real mirrors and replaced it with the magic mirror setting. So, theoretically speaking, this setup is fairly well optimized and should be more than ready for rain and SSR. Let's see if it is.
I can taste his fear.
SSR, turning it on. Now you might think that turning on SSR doesn't need its own section of this video. After all, you just click Options and the Graphics tab and then access it from this little drop-down menu. However, there is a catch that you absolutely need to be aware of. Let's say, for example, that you enter a heavy rain session with SSR off and you do a lap and see that your FPS is looking about normal. So you might think, okay, to get access to enhanced puddles, a phrase I still have to think about when I say it, you can exit the car, pull up the options menu, access the graphics tab and turn on SSR, say to low. Now, you jump straight back in the car and do a test lap and wow, look, normal frame rate. So you go for broke exit the car again, bring up the graphics tab again, and set SSR to high. And you do another test lap, and again. Wow. No issues. Your system is invulnerable to the demands of VR. Your GPU rules them all.
I am the king!
Except, no, it probably doesn't. At the end of your racing session, you will then close down iRacing, shut your computer down, and come back the next day. Boot up iRacing and load the same track with the same race conditions and the same settings you were so happy with yesterday. And wait, what has happened to your FPS? You haven't altered any settings at all in iRacing or on your computer. SSR is set to high just like it was yesterday, and yet today your FPS is significantly lower. What is going on? In a recent video, I discovered that some of the settings inside iRacing require the sim to be shut down and then relaunched in order to take effect, and some do not. If you don't shut down and relaunch, just changing a graphical setting in the iRacing options area might conceivably do nothing at all. In fairness to iRacing, the UI does mention this with some handy orange markers for a few of the settings that do require a reset of the sim, but unfortunately the UI forgets to mention a number of other settings that absolutely do require a reset of the sim in order for them to function at all. And guess what? SSR is one of them. I see these issues a lot on technical forums and my own Discord channel. People set up iRacing and everything is cool. Then they come back the next day, they haven't changed anything on their computer, and yet their FPS has disappeared down the VR crapper. It's disappointing and slightly illogical, because you can turn SSR off without rebooting the sim and thus magically restore your FPS, but not the other way around unless SSR was already set to high when you began that session. Yes, I know. It's disappointing and just one of those frustrating facts of life when it comes to VR and sim racing in general. But with that warning firmly established in all our minds, on with the video.
Damn, sometimes life sucks.
SSR FPS comparison in heavy rain. Okay, so FPS wise, SSR in the rain does look a bit bleak. Here are 3 videos again, all in heavy rain, this time so that you can see the full effect of water on the iRacing graphics engine. On the left is heavy rain with SSR off. In the middle, SSR is set to low, and on the right, SSR is set to high. Each of these video captures was taken after a reboot of the sim. As you can see here, FPS has reduced from 72 FPS with SSR off to 54 FPS for both low and high SSR. The graphics engine is incapable of maintaining even a lowly 72 FPS on the Quest 3, even with the assistance of the OpenXR toolkit. At these sorts of frames per second, racing in heavy rain is a tough drive. Honestly, I find this sort of drop in FPS to be mostly unplayable, or at the very least, an unpleasant experience. And all of that is pretty awful for VR users, but don't panic or start trawling eBay for a 4090 Super Plus Deluxe AI enhanced version, at least not yet. In the next section, I'll show you how to improve all of this by changing just one setting. And no, that's not clickbait.
Trust me.
Improving SSR performance with one click. I finally have some good news for you in this video. To improve your performance, all you need to do is change MSSA from ×4 to ×2. And the whole SSR situation will then get so much better, albeit at the cost of reduced visual fidelity around the track. Here are the tracks again with heavy rain. On the left is SSR set to low and with MSSA set to ×2, while on the right is SSR set to high and MSSA again set to ×2. As you can see, there is a clear improvement. With SSR set to low or high, you can see that MSSA ×2 offers a stable frame rate at 72 FPS in heavy rain, not dropping any frames at all. Remarkable. Yes, the track quality is not going to be the best. And I can imagine that on tracks where the shimmer of boundary fences is a real problem, setting iRacing to MSSA times 2 is going to make it look pretty awful. But if you want to race in the rain with SSR on, this is a sacrifice you are going to need to make. So, how does this look with a lot more cars on the track, with more water being splashed about by lots of tyres? Here is a standard 12-car AI race with SSR set to low on the left and high on the right. As you can see, the performance is still pretty good, with a decent GPU headroom still available at about 25%, delivering a solid 72 frames per second on all parts of the track. Of course, with larger races, 30 cars on the track and so on, the GPU headroom is probably going to reduce considerably, particularly at the grid. But as you get into the race, you may well be able to keep your frame rate steady enough to actually enjoy racing in the rain. And remember, this is with a 4070 Super, not a 4090. But the question still remains, after all this, is SSR actually worth all this effort? A closer examination of Puddles. So, after compromising on refresh rate, MSSA, and a good deal of what remains of my sanity, what do I actually think about the differences between SSR off and SSR set to either low or high? Honestly, if you had told me earlier this week that the next video I would make would be looking deeply into Puddles, I probably would have laughed nervously and edged away from you. However, now that I have done a deeper dive into SSR, I can see the point in examining Puddles for possible points of interest, even if at the same time I am questioning my life choices. But we are where we are, and now that I've found out how to implement SSR without destroying my FPS, it's time finally to see if the juice really is worth the squeeze. Here is a 12-car AI race in heavy rain, with iRacing set at MSSA times 2. The viewpoint is from the nose of the car so that you can get a better look at the track, but I've also turned off foveated rendering in the OpenXR toolkit to give as clear an image as possible of the track. This is SSR off, and this is SSR set to low, and this is SSR at high. What differences did you see? Nothing? Okay, let's try that again, but I'll show all three on the screen at the same time. Left to right, off, low and high. What about now? What differences can you see between these different video clips? Personally, I can't see that much difference between the different types of reflections in the water or how the puddles are displayed. Maybe tyre tracks left in the water are portrayed slightly better in SSR, but honestly, is that enough to justify the huge hit to performance and the compromises that I needed to make in order to obtain the minimal acceptable frame rate of 72 FPS? I don't think so. Even looking at what should be a stark difference between SSR off and SSR set to high doesn't reveal anything earth-shattering to me. Can you honestly say, looking at this playback, that there is anything being rendered in SSR high that you absolutely cannot race without? In my view, SSR is probably something that in future developments of iRacing may turn out to be interesting. But right now, the juice is just not worth the squeeze.
It is what it is.
Conclusions. First of all, apologies that I kept saying MSSA instead of MSAA throughout this video. I've only just noticed. I think my brain must have been waterlogged by so much rain. On that note, it has to be said, this video turned out to be tougher to make than I thought it would be. But at least I was able to show what effect SSR has, which settings work best with SSR, and most importantly, that if you do turn on SSR, you must reboot the sim for it to have any effect at all. Just Knowing this last tip will in many ways remove a lot of the pain from day-to-day iRacing sessions that many of you have, and leave you spending less time wondering why your supercomputer has great frame rates on one session only to tank that performance on another. As for the actual value of SSR in a race, I am unconvinced. From my older gamer's eyesight perspective, I just don't see a big enough difference to want it turned on at all, given the performance hit the sim suffers when I do so. Yes, I could always drop the MSAA 2x2, and that goes a long way to solving the performance issues. And I think for most people racing in the rain in VR, 72 Hz at MSAA x2 is probably going to be the default setting if you want to have a stable frame rate. But all of these tips are wonderful if you just want to see a stable frame rate when racing in the rain, but SSR doesn't really bring anything else to the table. Nothing at all. So personally, I will be leaving this setting off. What about you? Do you need SSR for racing in the rain? If so, why? What does it give you that SSR off takes away? Please comment below. In the meantime, I hope you found this video helpful, and until the next one, race clean, and I'll see you on track.
If you want, you drive it right.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click the like button, and if you haven't already done so, subscribe. Click the little bell icon if you want to be notified of any future videos.